A few days ago, I saw a video pop up on YouTube called Fixing Breath of the Wild's Biggest Problems. It was a great video and an even better idea, so I thought that I would try to do that in Super Smash Bros. Flavor. Now, Super Smash Bros. Is one of my favorite series of all time, and not only is it one of my favorite games itself, but through its roster, it has also introduced me to a ton of my favorite characters and franchises outside of just Smash Bros. And I think that's a similar experience that a lot of people have had with the game. There's just such an appeal to it of going and being able to beat up your friends in a productive way that brings you closer. But it definitely isn't without its faults. Not even just Smash Bros. Ultimate, but as a series as a whole. And as the franchise continues to grow and get more and more installments, it's getting more and more likely that we're going to see a new director of Super Smash Bros. Take the place of Masahiro Sakurai, who's the current director. And Smash is going to really have to change their mentality of improvement. So far, it's been bigger is better. More characters, more stages, more music, more World of Light. Ugh. So this is going to be a multi-part video series. I don't know how many things I'm going to find to fix about Super Smash Bros. Ultimate, but this is the first one, the roster. So without any further ado, let's get into it. Now, Super Smash Bros. Has seen an increase in roster size since the very first game, which only featured a handful of characters. And with each new game, I've always thought, wow, we have so many characters, how can they do more than this? And then after the next game, I look back on it and think, oh my goodness, how did I get by with so few characters? But in Super Smash Bros. Ultimate, we're going to have nearly 90 playable characters, which I believe is more than any other fighting game out there. Some people would argue, well, we can't really increase the size from this without messing up the game's balance, so let's just keep what we have. But I think that the issue with the game's balance goes a bit deeper. Now, what they've done with Super Smash Bros. Ultimate is absolutely incredible. Nearly every character is viable to some extent, and there isn't any other character that totally eclipses the rest of the cast, like Meta Knight and Brawl. But because they have so many characters in the game, I think that they've hit a point of diminishing return. In the original Super Smash Bros. On the Nintendo 64, there were only a dozen characters, so each character got their time to shine, most of them having their own stage, and a lot of care and detail was put into their limited movesets. When Melee came around, this was only doubled upon. But as Brawl and Smash 4 and now Super Smash Bros. Ultimate have just added more and more characters, by nature of how many characters there are, the only viable way to have the balance of the game make any sense is to balance more based off of gimmicks rather than the actual engine of the game. Let me explain what I mean real fast. In Super Smash Bros. Melee, Ness is hot garbage. Compared to some of the higher tiered characters like Fox, Falco, or Marth, Ness just has so many tools working against him that make him a pretty unviable character within the game of Melee. That being said, just because Ness's moveset is bad and just because he has bad frame data on a lot of his moves, under the hands of a skilled player, he can still cause a lot of damage and wreak havoc. The same goes with other so-called unviable characters in the game, such as Pichu or Bowser. Melee didn't do the best job giving each character a super viable move and building around that, but because Melee's gameplay engine was so strong, any character was able to be picked up and used pretty effectively. Now, this brings us to Super Smash Bros. Ultimate. Like I said earlier, each character can be picked up and played viably, but to me, the balancing mechanic is a little bit different. Let's look at Ness again, for example. To me, it seems like most of the character of Ness is designed around his PK Fire, or at least that's how he tends to be played. Any player can just go pick up Ness and throw PK Fire over and over and over again. The character just has a couple really strong options, and because of that, the balance of the rest of the moveset and how it interacts with the game's engine doesn't need to be as strong. So what's the fix to this? Obviously, they could go through all 90-something characters and eventually refine it to something that feels similar, having a stronger game engine that allows characters to work within it to their advantage, rather than being based off of a gimmicky moveset. But I think that the better answer is going to be pretty unpopular here. I think that they need to cut the roster down. Now, how far down are we talking? 80 characters? 70? 60? I'm a little bit of an extremist with this. I wanted to say about 20 to 30 characters total. Somewhere right between the roster size of Super Smash Bros. Melee and Super Smash Bros. Brawl. I think a cast this small would allow for better game balance and allow for more scrutiny to be paid to each character to make sure that they can all shine under the right circumstances. And shine with their entire character rather than just parts of it that can carry the character. So that brings us to the question of the day and everybody's favorite game show. Ink, what characters are you going to cut? This segment was brought to you by the letter F and the numbers 4, 2, and 0. Anyway, like I said, we're going to cut the cast down to about 30 characters. Now, I want to make sure that we can still keep this a good representation of Nintendo throughout the years. And because of that, I want to try to include as many franchises as I can, and stick with franchises that represent some of Nintendo's best-selling titles. The rule that I came up with for adding a character is that each series can only have one character representing the franchise unless they're in Nintendo's top 10 best-selling series of all time. I also wanted to acknowledge that Super Smash Bros. Isn't just a celebration of Nintendo anymore, but rather it's a celebration of gaming as a whole. And third-party characters have become such an integral part of the game that it would feel weird to cut them out, although I would be fine with a first-party only game as well. I have it broken down to 31 characters, with about 2/3 of those being Nintendo picks and the last third being third-party. Let's start with Super Mario. This is Nintendo's flagship franchise, and I think it should be represented accordingly. And it's hard for me to imagine any picks besides Mario and Bowser here. Now, I think that we should give Mario a few skins over his original costume in order for it to feel like we have more characters in. For example, he could have a Luigi or Wario alt, kind of like Olimar has with the other Pikmin commanders. And while we're at it, let's give Bowser some cool skins as well, such as Dry Bowser or something. Next up, we have Legend of Zelda, and I'm going to boil this down to Link and Ganon. He's the figurehead of the series, and he has had a lot of appearances over the years, which is why each skin for the character would be comprised of his different appearances. And I also think that we should throw a Linkle skin in there as a nod to Hyrule Warriors. And this brings us to Ganon. Notice that I'm saying Ganon and not Ganondorf, his human form. Ganondorf has only appeared in a couple of games over the years, but Ganon has been present throughout the entire franchise. And I think that we could easily make Ganondorf a skin swap for Ganon. Ganon would use his trident and magic, and it would be really funny to have a pig in the game. This brings us to Donkey Kong. For the Donkey Kong series, we're going to have Donkey Kong himself and King K. Rool. I was trying to decide between King K. Rool here and Diddy Kong, but we fought so hard to get King K. Rool in the game, and it adds another villain to the series, so I'm going to go with it. Next up, we have Fire Emblem. Now, I'm going to cheat a little bit here. Fire Emblem would technically qualify for 2 characters, but I think that it would be alright to have it only take up 1 character slot. I was trying to think of a good way to represent the series, because it really hasn't been represented well within Smash. Nearly every character has just been a sword fighter that's felt kind of the same as other characters in the game. So I thought about adding a shapeshifter or some magic, but I ended up deciding on Ephraim and Erica. Ephraim and Erica are from the game The Sacred Stones, and I envision them working as a character swap for each other, kind of like Pyra and Mithra, but when you're done with one, you would get swapped in by a teleport spell from the game. For example, maybe as Ephraim attacks with his spear, you'd have a special that would allow a support fire to come in with magic or arrows. Or maybe their final smash would be a Manakete coming in to pick up the character. I don't know, I think that there's a lot they can do here. This brings us over to Pokemon. Now, Pokemon is absolutely deserving of 2 characters, but how do you boil it down to just 2? The simple answer that I found is you cheat. So I'm going to add 2 Pokemon trainers. One, the current one that we have in the game, and the other one, the rival. The base Pokemon trainers team would be made up of Pikachu, Greninja, and Mewtwo, with the rival's character being made up of Grovyle, Blaziken, and Inteleon. Next up, we have Animal Crossing, which I think technically qualifies as a series that could have 2 reps, but I think that it's going to be just fine with 1. So we're going to go with Isabelle. For Metroid, we're going to bring back Zero Suit Samus and Samus's ability to swap between each other and add them into a single character slot. Next up, we have the Mii Fighters. Now, I was a little hesitant with this one at first because the Mii Fighters are really just an idea of a character rather than an actual character from a game, but Miis have made so many appearances in Nintendo's best-selling games like Wii Sports that I think it would be a crime not to include them. I would want their moveset to be comprised of things you can do in the Wii Sports franchise, rather than just feeling like generic swordsmen, brawlers, or gunners. Now, the next familiar pick we're going to have is Kirby. His series has always sold incredibly well, and it's the baby of Masahiro Sakurai, so I think it makes a lot of sense to include. As a skin swap for him, we can have Meta Knight, Bandana D, and Marks. Now, this brings me up to 2 unorthodox picks that I was really surprised to see among Nintendo's best-selling games. We have the Big Brain Academy Professor and the Excite Biker. I was blown away at how successful these games are, and I would really look forward to seeing them included in the game. Next up, we've got Duck Hunt Dog, who once again is a great selling character, easy pick, followed by a few other familiar faces to finish off our first-party representatives. We'd have Waluigi to represent the spin-off games from Mario, Fox, Inkling, and Olimar. Over Fox, we'd have alts for Falco, Wolf, and the rest of the Star Fox team. With Inkling, we would add the Octolings in over it, and with Olimar, you can swap between all of the Pikmin commanders. And this all brings us to our third-party picks. It was surprisingly difficult to narrow down this list. I once again sorted it by some of the best-selling and most iconic games of all time, and this is what I came up with. I think some of these are going to surprise you. First off, we've got Mega Man and Sonic. Nothing too new here, except we would give them different skin swaps. Mega Man can swap between his different appearances over the years, as well as characters like Proto Man or Bass. Sonic would have the ability to swap between characters like Shadow, Amy, Metal Sonic, things like that. Our next third-party pick is Ryu, who would be able to switch between Ken and Chun-Li. I know that Chun-Li plays a little bit differently, but I think it also makes a lot of sense to include her in the game, and we only get one slot for this franchise. Pac-Man is another no-brainer pick. He is the arcade video game, and it's hard for me to imagine not having him. Just give him a Mrs. Pac-Man alt and we're good. Final Fantasy is another one of the most influential best-selling series of all time, and among those, Final Fantasy VII is the most popular. I was having trouble deciding between Sephiroth and Cloud, but the answer I came to again was to cheat. Kinda like how Pokemon can switch between certain characters, we would include Cloud and allow him to switch between Tifa and Barret. Now, the only other pick that I'm going to include that we've seen in the game before is Steve from Minecraft. Minecraft has just sold so incredibly well that it would be a crime not to include it in the game, and I think he is already perfectly represented. I wouldn't change a thing about how he's in the game. Our remaining third-party picks have not seen the light of day in Smash yet. We're going to start off with a World of Warcraft rep. World of Warcraft is one of the most influential and popular online MMOs, and it has held that title for years. I don't know the game super well, so maybe any of you who know can let me know in the comments down below, but I ended up deciding on the character of Arthas. Next up, we're going to add Agumon from Digimon. Digimon technically started as a video game franchise and then turned into more of an anime and manga, and then back to video games, and then back to anime manga, and then kind of just disappeared for a few years before coming back to video games. Needless to say, it's pretty complicated, but it's been incredibly influential and one of the only games to really challenge Pokemon and what they're doing. And the face of that series is probably Agumon. I would have a hard time arguing against him. Our last three inclusions for the roster are going to be the Dragonborn from Skyrim, one of the best RPGs of all time, Lara Croft to add some female representation as well as represent an incredibly influential series, and Doomguy, whose series I think has more influence than any other character I've talked about on my channel. And there you go, that's my whole list. Now, there were 3 games in particular that sold incredibly well and are incredibly influential, but I wasn't able to include within this limit and the constraints of Smash. These characters are Lego, Tetris, and Tony Hawk, believe it or not. So I'm going to have all of these 3 characters represented in new stages. One would be Lego Throughout the Ages, where you can go between the different settings and set pieces through the Lego franchise. The other would be a Tetris stage, and the last one would be you fighting in a Tony Hawk skateboard rink. And those are all of my picks. This would be my first step to making Super Smash Bros. Even better, and I'm excited to see what they'll do going forward. But what do you think? Who would you add and who would you cut? And how would you fix the roster of Smash Bros. Ultimate, or would you just add more or leave it the same? Let me know in the comments below and hit subscribe to see part 2 where I talk about the single player game. And until next time, keep thinking.